Welcome to Hopeful Tribe, Leah. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. You guys, this is my friend Leah Kimble-Price. She's an LMFT, and we actually met in a group called Therapists of Color. It's right here in Oakland, California. And I want to share with you. This lady's been all over. She worked at SF Child Crisis Services, West Coast Children's Clinic, Bay Area Youth Centers, STARS Community Services, Lincoln Families, Catholic Charities of the East Bay, and now interim ED at the Bay Area Women Against Rape. And I really admire her as a person and as a therapist. And so I asked her to come here and do an interview. And I'm so excited.
Here we are. I'm glad I updated my website.
Right? I don't know how you do it with a 15-month-old at home.
Oh my gosh.
Tell us that first. Tell me how you're coping.
Oh my goodness. Well, I need to re-engage sleep as my friend. You know, we've become estranged. And I just really want to re-engage that relationship and pour into that relationship.
Yes.
But honestly, I think I have found my takeaway from being a first-time parent is that when you get into generator mode, when you start making things, it spreads in a really good way. So I was I'm responding to some primordial core base instincts to generate and create new life and new things, and I've just been excited that that's how parenthood is coming to me. It's really expanded my creativity and made me less afraid. What is there to lose? So yes, a couple of other things: guilt, doubt, shame, other things I've never felt before.
But you've come into your full motherhood phase.
Yeah, it's wild. I think it's just seeing a whole person. I'm oh, look at you growing every day in direct correlation to my efforts.
Right?
That's pretty cool. It's it's like a nice little biofeedback loop of and of course my kiddo's an empath, so surprise.
Cool.
So yeah, when things ain't right, we all hear about it. When I need more, I see them, they get sort of close to me and come and sit in my lap and look in my eyes and, are you okay? It's very cute. It's very sweet. So luckily I'm not upset very often, but the few times that it's happened, the kiddo is what's happening? There's a disturbance in the force.
I got one of those. I got one like that. And he was just here for his 35th birthday.
Aww.
He's such a love bug. He's still that way. But what really used to blow me away was when he was 2 and I came home feeling tired, he would come up to me and ask, how are you feeling today? Aww. And I was like, oh my God.
What?
I didn't know 2-year-olds could think like that. And then if I said I was tired, and whatever I was feeling,
yeah,
massage with his tiny little 2-year-old
that is
hands.
so cute.
Oh my God, I love that baby.
Toddler massage. I'm here for toddler massage.
Oh my God.
Oh, it's adorable.
So it really is precious to have an empath baby.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's just that you can't hide.
No.
You can't hide anything you feel because they know already.
Or when I try to pretend that they're the only one feeling it, I'm like, what's up with you?
Yeah.
What's up with you?
My mother did a lot of that gaslighting.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
It's not
helpful.
me. It's you.
Not
no,
helpful.
It's us. So for the record, it's us. And mostly you.
It's really not good for children's mental health, especially if they're very empathic, to gaslight them.
Yeah, I tried one good time to be nothing's wrong. I'm fine. And I was like, Leah, this gonna have consequences.
Yeah.
As someone who's been in therapy since you were 5 years old, you know for a fact this is not a good look.
Oh my
Abort
God.
mission.
Oh my God.
Mayday.
Well,
Mayday.
at least you went to therapy before you became a mother. A lot of
Yeah.
people do not do that in that order,
Yeah, and I
And
can see how it would bring up everything.
mm-hmm.
Everything. Even just being, I had my child in the hospital, and which was sort of the plan, but I wasn't really sure. And I've had like gray hair since I was 11. Parentified kid, am I right? But I went like full. I got this full streak just from being in the hospital. Like
Wow.
I was only in the hospital for 3 days. I had a
Wow.
C-section, and I came out just from that medical racism and trauma. I was like, oh crap! Like, here we go. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad I have a support system. I'm so glad that people check on me. I'm so glad that, we had folks doing Reiki and praying and just sending those energies and, checking in constantly. And it just really opened my eyes to like, wow, without these things already in place, what is the expectation? How do we expect people to thrive and be prepared to, recenter their entire lives around a little person who needs everything from you when you're being depleted, actively being depleted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my kiddo had jaundice, and the doctor came in and was like, okay, so baby has jaundice, so we're going to move them into the ICU. And I was like, you're actually not. They were like, but I've already ordered the, like on the little tappy tap tap, but I've already ordered it. I was like, well, you didn't ask me. This is my child. So I'm gonna need you to step out of my room. They were like, well, you're gonna have to talk to the doctor. I was like, I would hope so. I would hope that with a decision this important, that the physician who ordered it would want to come and talk to me about it. So yes, we will be talking to the doctor. Get out.
This brought back a very traumatic memory when Sammy was a baby. So Sammy, my youngest, was 5 weeks early. Oof. He surprised me. Note to expectant moms out there, don't take maternity leave early, because as soon as I took maternity leave, I went into labor. I was like, oh God.
Why do we even have due dates? It's like, you don't know. Stop lying. The doctors don't know. They don't know. It's all an estimation. The whole thing.
So anyway, I had him 5 weeks early, and so he had jaundice, which is really normal in premature babies. And so we did go to the newborn ICU, and the first hearing test he got, he didn't respond because he was premature and he was really,
he's like, what?
What? And I joked with the hearing test technician, he just didn't like his music,
Do you have anything with a downbeat?
Yeah. I know. He had some songs. He wanted a different station. And he'd been home for 2 days already. So I knew he could hear. He had been reacting to my voice, everyone else's voices. So I knew he could hear. I knew he wasn't deaf. It was fine,
Yeah.
But they didn't believe me.
Of course not. Who are you? His mother?
Yeah. And they went so far as, after I said no several times to the MRI, because they were going to drug him for the MRI.
So yeah.
And he was only 5.5 pounds. And I said, I didn't go through all that pain of natural childbirth so that you could kill him with some drugs that he doesn't need for a test he doesn't need.
Just because you're nosy. Wait a week. Jeez.
What exactly could you do for him if you found out today that he's sick?
Exactly.
And they said, well, nothing really. Early intervention usually starts at 6 months. And I said, okay, well, how about if I agree
in 6 months
to come back in 6 months so you can retest his hearing? Because they were about to call the people on me, Leah. just because I refused a test.
And I'm like, I'm about to call the people on y'all. Okay. You don't want me to call my people. You don't want my people up in here.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-mm.
It was so traumatic. And when you just
So
have a baby,
much.
you've got all those hormones coursing
You're so
through you.
tender. You're just a little tender person. Like, the universe has made you soft and tender
Mhm,
for the intention of receiving a young person. Not
mhm,
for, not for medical institutions BS. That's not what
mhm.
that's for.
And I just think it's so horrible to have to fight those
Yeah.
institutions while you're so vulnerable. It's just, oh,
Yeah. I feel like every hour there I was arguing with them about something.
gave you
Um,
gray hair.
Yeah, exactly. Thank goodness. Thank goodness for the nurses. Thank goodness for the nurses, because I can see that, like, they just do so much to, like, shield you from these systems. Yes, sometimes they're also participating, but you know, they really are intervening constantly to protect people's psyche and their well-being and their peace. And I was like, dang, that's what you do all day? Let me buy you a drink. Mm.
Right? Yay for nurses.
Right? I'm like, I'm a therapist, and I'm like, this is a lot of work.
And midwives. I had my
Yes.
when I was having my third son, because he came early, I couldn't
Mhm.
have him at home like I'd
Yeah.
planned. And so I called the midwife, and she came and drove in the middle of the night to the hospital
Yeah.
so that she could be there to, shield me from the institution.
Yeah. Yeah. No, my midwife was a game changer. Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. Grateful, grateful, grateful.
Hmm. I love it. I love it that we started talking about kids too, because originally I had asked you what you wanted to talk about, and I wrote down emotional liberation. But I
Boom.
feel like talking about kids kind of leads us
Hmm.
naturally to what is so important about emotional liberation.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you want to go there?
Sure. Yeah. I was thinking about this, as we were getting ready, and I was driving into the office this morning of like, where does it start? And that is where it starts. And, I think about my own emotional liberation journey, and what I have been coaching and helping parents with since I started working with kids, which is 15 years ago now. And it really is about, especially as a Black woman, as a cisgender femme, all the things, right? Socialized Black, socialized female, an Indigenous person, all those things. Um, you're born free, and then you encounter systems, right? And you encounter oppression, and you encounter other people's trauma and the things they project onto you, and how, your symbolism for other people and things in their lives. And so they react to you based on their own schemas, right? And their own experience and their own pain and their own joy. And children are, because they are the evidence of the divine, right? They are the evidence of procreation and humanity. If you don't have good experiences with those things, or they're triggering for you, then people tend to point that towards children, right? And then the kids are like, so who am I in this world? Am I myself? Am I just a vehicle for someone else's joy or pain or all these things, right? Um, and so when I was thinking about that, I was like, oh yeah, this is why I like working with young people and their families, because when you can explain, look, I don't know how the rest of the world is going to see you. I don't know necessarily what's going to happen when you walk out this door, or encounter systems, or are defined by external entities. But if you can maintain your emotional liberation, then you can sort of experience those things, notice them, pay attention to them, and it almost is like an ever-growing mindfulness exercise. I'm noticing that. I see that. I'm letting that thing pass by me. I understand that it's important. I understand it's impacting me, but it does not define me. It's not my identity. And I think I always, when I do like DEI work, or when I used to do cultural humility trainings at an org that I worked at, I would always tell the story of like when I was a kid, I came to school and like in my household, everything was Black. So the books, like maybe there were white characters in books, but all the imagery that I saw outside of television was centered around Black people. And so when I got to school, I was like, what up, everyone? Kindergarten, good to see you here. Black people, you know? And the kids were like, it's bad out here. Like, I was like, no, it's amazing. And they're like, no, it's pretty bad. And that was really my first experience of like something where Blackness was not a positive or centered, because even the non-Black people that my mother brought into our world felt that way. So then I didn't know that there was another way to feel. And so I think about that, like, because that's how my story started, that's my core. And so when we're working with folks who, as almost everyone we work with, I can't imagine actually someone who isn't in this situation, you know, we experience a lot of suffering and a lot of pain that comes from how we are defined, that comes from how we are seen, that comes from how systems have decided to interact with us and how to respond to our needs and our existence, right? And so when folks are coming in to talk about that or wanting to engage in healing work around it, I think it's important to start with where are you free? You know, look in your environment. If that means you're only free when you're singing in the shower, you know, if you're only when you're walking the dog, if it's only in that, you know, little moment before everyone else in the house wakes up, if you live outside, if it's that moment where, you know, you're in your tent or your whatever the situation is, because we're all in different situations, but hopefully in your life you have at least a deep breath's worth of freedom and that you can identify. And then that gives us a place to work from as a seed and to expand from there. So where else can you feel free? Well, you know, this is how, you know, especially I used to work a lot with kids of color in schools. And so, you know, we have the school to prison pipeline, we have human trafficking, we have child abuse, we have discrimination, we have stereotype threat, we have, you know, all these inequities, right? And we have young people feeling like I'm not good enough, you know, or I've been suspended, or they're restricting my movement, they're restricting my ideas, I can't talk. I mean, the idea that we even ask literally anyone. I think the pandemic has taught me that of like, wow, sitting still in a chair, looking in the same direction for hours at a time is shitty. And it's like, wow, this is what we ask young people to do. I'm having a hard time.
Right?
I want to get up. I want to move around. I'm like, yeah, that's why they sharpen the pencil. I know
So
these
most
kids
of your
today.
positions were out in the community where you
Yeah.
were moving around a lot. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, or just in the day, you have to move from office to office to start a conversation to, you know, you're moving.
Yeah. Yeah, during the pandemic, I worked at a psychiatric facility in downtown Oakland, and it was the most sedentary position I had in my life, and I found it really difficult. Of course, 90% of my time I was just madly typing Medi-Cal forms on a computer. But it was just not my jam. I really need to be up, moving, you know.
And even if because of mobility, you know, sitting down is your jam. Maybe there are people who sit down their whole lives, but you still have control over the direction in which you're facing and the attention that you have. And so thinking about that with young people or anyone who feels like their movement is being restricted or judged or policed in some kind of way, those are the folks that I like to start with. So where are you free? You know, what do you have control over? Because where do we see, you know, control, a lack of control or difficulty with impulse control or all of those things, or like, it's when people feel like they don't have agency. It's when they feel like they don't have control over themselves that they try to find other ways to get that need met, you know? And it's like, that's where we're seeing, oh, the behavior is off, or, oh, you know, this person is hard to manage, or they take up a lot of space. When we do interact with them, why is that? Well, where in their lives are they feeling constricted and restricted? And emotional liberation, especially in these United States, is sometimes the only thing that we have. So I that's really sort of like where I like to start with planting that seed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yet emotional liberation is not a normal thing in this society.
No.
It's really, it would have to be normal within households for
Right.
people to even feel like it's normal out in the wider society, right?
Exactly. And that's not, I mean, that's not the parenting feedback and advice that I've been getting is like, let your kid be free. That's really not. I have never looked so longingly at those backpack leashes.
Oh,
I'm like, I don't think this is my joint. You know, I get it, but I don't think this is me. But it looks good. It looks good sometimes. When I'm like, don't touch that. Don't put that in your mouth. It's unsafe. Don't, you know, I'm like, I'm not trying to keep you from expressing yourself, but you don't understand that that doesn't go in your mouth. Okay? And that's also the street. And you know,
mm,
all the things, right? And my kiddos was born to 6 pounds. They're a lightweight. So they like to climb. I'm like, you're a flyer. Sweetie, you will fly. When you jump, you catch air. You don't have a lot of if you get into tumbling or something, you're going to be the one they toss on the top. Okay, so you can't just climb. And I need you to be whole, you know, and that's my job is to keep you whole, you know, in all the ways, right? And so I think if we, um, you know, if we treated parenting and caregiving as with more value, then the people who do it would treat the people receiving it with more value. You know, this is a trickle down.
true.
Um, and
True.
so when it's seen as important, then people treat it as important. And they are given the space to do that. Time off from work, you know, compensation, capacity, compassion, you know, systems are created around the things that we value. And so, you know, it's hard to be in charge of keeping someone else's cup filled when you have systems telling you that what you do is not important. You know, it's
Right.
quite the cognitive dissonance. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insane how little support parents in this country get. Um, I feel like it's gotten a little bit, tiny bit better, but it's still overall just horrible. And I think part of why um, it's been okay for me is that I've lived in California most of the time that I've been a
We're
parent.
in the bubble. Mm-hmm.
So at
Yeah.
least we got 6 weeks paid leave, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of nonprofits and corporate entities give more than that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So at least you have a little bit of time, but you know from having lived through it now that you
Yeah.
actually need a lot more than 6 weeks
Yeah. You
to
know,
get used to the
6 weeks
new
is
role.
cool. 3 years is also cool.
Yes.
And as much as I love being back at work, it would be nice to not have to be back at
Yes.
work. You know, it would be, and to even that, right? It's like the facts. I understand so many more things now of like why people are grumpy. I'm like, now I
Right?
look back and I'm like, okay, 50% of the grumpy people I've encountered since I was a child were parents that I understand. Or caregivers, you know, it's like this is the same for when you're doing elder care or when you're caring with folks with, you know, any kind of capacity challenge that needs you to be their eyes, ears, you know, navigators through life. It's a lot, you know, it's a
Yeah,
lot. And so
it
it
is.
doesn't feel good when it's also not seen as important.
Yeah, I even had a situation while I was in grad school. Um, so I went through college and grad school with my children and
Aw,
working full time.
wow.
And when I was in grad school, I was working full time at Larkin Street, and I was going through some stuff,
Hmm.
and I needed to take one night off of a class, and I had never asked for any special accommodations ever, all the way through school,
Wow.
because I really was proud. I like wanted to show I could do it. And this lady who was in charge of my program, told me that if I didn't come to class that night, that I would have to repeat the entire class.
No.
And because the classes were ordered sequentially, that meant I
Right.
had to repeat an entire year of graduate school.
Oh my gosh.
And had no consciousness about how that affected me and my children. And uh, what was funny is later she had twins.
I mean, congratulations. That's beautiful. What a blessing.
So I had to laugh really hard when she had twins. I thought, well, some things are just karmic,
And that's the thing, like, why is that a rule for anybody? Oh my gosh, one night off and you have to start over? Like,
Yeah.
regardless of certain, why does that even exist? Why is there any system where, something so important is hinging on this one moment?
Yeah.
It's like, where is the respect for the cumulative experience? Where is the like, why are we not seeing people as whole? I only matter, I only exist if I come to this class tonight, otherwise basically you're erasing me. Like,
Yes.
how is that cool? And I think it's so funny. I was looking at all kinds of things while I was pregnant in terms of medical information and like how your body works and all these things, and I'm like, this ain't in no book, nobody said nothing about that. But looking at the medical model is based, even prenatal care is based on the male body. Like,
Really?
yeah, when you go into medical journals, they literally were just like, women are men, but with breasts. And it's like, and if you look back, and I was like, well, that explains why all this stuff, they're like, you're obese, or you're this, or you're that, or like your blood pressure is higher. And I'm like, okay, so where are we starting? And so when you were talking and telling that story, it made me think also, like, every single system is designed to be like, the baseline is cisgender white male. And then you just start adding deficits, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is how far away you are from the norm. And I'm like, yeah, this is why we have a census, people, because when you take attendance, you see who actually shows up. And I'm like, that hasn't been true in a long time. That's not the median, the mean, or none of it. It doesn't, we're not counting. I saw this thing the other day about like, what is a minority? And it's like, or who has been minoritized? I'm like, this is a whole other thing. It's like, the adage of, the story is always the same when the hunter tells it versus when the lion tells the story. And I'm like, it's about who writes history,
Mm-hmm.
And who defines normal and who defines good and who defines right. And that is why, like, emotional liberation for me is so important, because it is the thing you have control over. You do write your own story.
Mm-hmm.
You can have, footnotes, you can have edits, you can have contributors, but it's still your story, and it's the thing that you tell back to yourself the most often. And so when you are like, I am, lead author, it changes things. It doesn't it doesn't mean, oh yes, I got to be in that class. Okay, fine. But what's the narrative? I tried my hardest. Cool. The B is not the narrative. It's you tried your hardest, or I really enjoyed myself, or that was the year that was really hard on me and I'm glad I even stayed in school at all. Those are the truths, the grade you got in the class is not, that's not the lead, as they say. You're burying the lead. And I think that's sort of how I like to, describe it when folks are like, what are we even talking about? What is emotional liberation?
Well, when this is how I like to frame it with young people, if you can 100% control your own feelings, it's like being a superhero.
Yeah, exactly.
Because very few people can do it. And if you can get there where you are the only one who can make yourself feel any kind of way,
Yeah.
then you're going to feel so powerful.
Yeah. And if you're already feeling powerless and then you add into your narrative, so-and-so made me feel like, you can't even own the powerlessness. That also belongs to the other person, as
Right.
opposed to like this, I felt powerless when this happened. It's sometimes it really is as simple as semantics. English fails us every single day, and almost every single interaction, English fails. It's like one of the wackest languages that exists, because it's like, as someone who's monolingual, trust me, it's trash. But it really does help, because the language is so limited. Those small alterations make a huge difference. They really, really do. And that's why I think journaling is super important. Having sounding boards, making your own recordings of yourself talking about things so that you can play them back, and adjust those narratives, rewrite them, revise. Similar to consent. See how I work this out? It's moment to moment. Nothing is concrete or finite. You always have an opportunity to change your mind.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. Sorry, I'm sweating to death here.
The air conditioner just came on and saved me, because I was like, "Ooh, I'm getting dewy," as they say in Hollywood.
Yeah. Oh, you're looking lovely.
Oh,
Looking
thanks.
lovely.
I haven't been outside in 15 months, but thank you.
Maybe now that you have childcare, you can get more sun.
Look at that. Look at God. Look at that. I'm going to go outside.
How do you feel like becoming a mother has changed your perspective? Like the main ways, I know, probably in lots of ways.
I mean, just, throwing literally every judgment I've ever had about a parent out the window. I'm like, wow. Imagine how many hours I could get back from all the time I was judging parents. I'm like, I could have, rebuilt a carburetor with all the time I spent thinking about other people's parenting. And now I'm like, oh, yeah. Sometimes stuff doesn't happen how you want it to, or you adjust. Or, I think I have always had, as someone who was raised in an organizer's home, my mom was also a public school teacher and taught in Oakland public schools my entire life until she passed away, and beyond, honestly, continues to teach.
I'm sure she's still teaching.
Yeah, exactly. Constantly. Her students are always like, "Are you?" And I'm like, "No, that would be impossible, but thank you." But I think growing up in an organizer home, growing up with a teacher, growing up in an education space, with folks who were aligned with and hold the same values as the Black Panther Party, and just having that, I've always understood like the historical origins of respectability politics and how we engage with each other and the nuances of race and gender and all these things. But I don't gender my kid most of the time. And
I noticed that.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
I just don't know, and
Right.
So, when I was pregnant, as this happens, people are like, "What are you having?" And I'm like, "A kid." And they're like, "No, what are you having?" And I'm like, "A baby." And they're like, "But what's the gender?" I was like, "I don't know." How am I supposed to know? And they're like, "No, what's the sex?" I'm like, "You want to talk about my kid's genitals? Because no, thank you. I don't know you. I don't think we have anything else to talk about, And,
Right.
At first, even my family was like, "Okay, all right, granola, relax." But as time has gotten on, we've really seen how much, just buying clothes that they like and seem to, and increase their mobility and allow them to express themselves. And it's just not necessary.
Yeah.
It's literally not necessary. What is the information that is being communicated here, and why? And so I think just seeing the origins of how we get socialized, having now being able to bear witness to and participate in the socializing of a human being, I'm like, oh, it really is every single small thing. My mom my hair was short as a kid. I had a natural, it was the 80s. And so my mom cut my hair short like hers. but I had my ears pierced, as brown people generally do, at 6 weeks old. And so I had earrings, and my mom was into pinafore dresses. I don't know. So we had like, I used to call it Little Oakland on the Prairie. So like full pinafore Mary Jane tights, shortcut with the earrings, right? And people would always be like, how cute is this little boy? And she's like, what? Constantly. Oh, your little boy is so cute. And she'd be like, in a dress. It was the 80s. So in a dress. Like, what else do I need to do to communicate? And it was still like the binary pushing, like, no, we got to see barrettes. We got to see a headband. We got to, and I'm like, wow, push. And then, you start to get defensive and you want to protect your kid and make sure they're being seen. And I'm realizing that, again, I don't have control over those narratives. So I will focus on the ones that seem most important. And that is, are you safe? Are you happy? As much as I can see, I honestly don't even know if you are happy. That's a whole other thing, right? It's like, all I can do is, pay attention to the hints, the clues, what is evidence-based. I'm like, well, you've been playing and singing to yourself, so I think we're having a good day. But I can't assign even meaning to that, and so it has really freed me from a lot to just remind myself, like, as Sweet Honey in the Rock says, your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters, even there's the binary, of life longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You can give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the place of tomorrow. Which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You can strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. And that really, like, my mom used to play that song for us when we were kids all the time, obviously, because I remember it off the top of my head. Right. And now it's true. I'm like, oh, they're my child, but I'm also there. Like, we belong to each other,
Right. So as they grow, it's going to be even more apparent, like, how much they are their own person on their own path.
Yeah. And so when people say, well, what do you, I'm like, until further notice, here's the pronouns we're using. So until they have language and can say different and provide us with an update, we're going to use the ones that seem to appear to be true based on the information that we have. And I'm totally okay with being wrong. And so my hope is just that when it is time to have a conversation about how they want to be addressed, we've left the door wide open for that conversation. That's another reason why I do that, because even if, inside of our household, even if we have sort of an idea of where gender is leaning right now, they're going to encounter the rest of the world. And so I want everyone in their support system and everyone who loves them to start practicing they, them, because you may need to use it later. So practice now. Get used to it. Practice now.
I like that. I never went that far. I just had a very open kind of family, and many of the people in our inner circle are queer and have different pronouns, and so it was just like always known to my kids that all these things are possible.
Yeah.
And it was funny because my youngest son is the only one who came out with any kind of non-conventional sexual orientation. And he was, for many years, kind of questioning his gender. And was like playing with it a lot. And when he was in kindergarten, he went to kindergarten in Bernal Heights that was all girls except for him. And it was like so
my tribe.
Yeah, so it was so cute because they just all loved each other, and he'd wear dresses and they'd follow him everywhere. And it was just okay because it was San Francisco, like nobody tripped about it. But no, when one day when he was 16, he sat down in my room and said, "You know what? I think that I'm just like you. I think that I'm comfortable in the body that I got. I
Hmm.
just am equally female and male."
Yeah.
And I was
Right.
like, cool, you know? It was
Exactly.
never a thing, you know? It wasn't
Yeah.
like a big trauma that we all had to
And,
travel.
and right, and we have, this again about being in that California bubble where I have more leeway in terms of, I don't have systems forcing me to decide or making any decision or description of my child concrete to the point that I can't change it later, and
Mhm.
so that's not everybody's options, like a lot of people who watch this are going to be like, okay, but it's,
Oh,
that's
did
the
I tell
options
you?
that we have.
I think it's good. I think it's good. And,
Yes.
and I think you should know Hopeful Tribes being seen in 41 countries now.
Hey, international.
So it's kind of cool because
Yeah.
they can get sort of an idea of what life here is like.
Yeah.
And, in some places, this would just never even occur to them.
Yeah. And I'm just talking outside of California. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think that's sort of the thing. I'm like, this is state to state I'm talking.
In fact, if you go too many miles east, it's not going to be this bad.
Right? Exactly. Okay. Bay Area, But yeah, no, I totally hear that, and such a sweet story about your son. I think yeah, there's room for that. We were looking, my childcare is looking for childcare is my life. Currently, I have a family member who's on vacation, which is the reason I have childcare. But I actually do need to find a nanny. But anyone, message me.
Yeah. Let
But
us know.
let us know. Like and subscribe. Let us know. But in talking with, I was exploring a nanny share, and so I had met another mom through La Leche. Shout out to La Leche. I'm also a
Yay.
breastfeeding, chest feeding parent, and so as we're chatting, and getting to know each other, I was like, kiddos pronouns are she, they, question mark, optional, and their response was, oh, are you a queer mom? And I was like, not that I know of. I was like, up until now, I'm 40, and so far, no.
So far,
But
no.
we'll see. We'll see what else I learn about myself as we move
Right?
through
These
this
things can be
process.
fluid,
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that just as the world becomes more available to our young people, they're not changing. They're allowed to be more of themselves. They just have more options. And so I also love to see folks who, you know, are coming out. I don't even know if coming out's the right phrase, but just reintroducing themselves to people with new descriptors that just weren't available to them as young people. I mean,
Mhm.
that's not how I remember being when I was a teenager. But then I look at teenagers right now and they're like, yeah, I am deciding to just not participate in gender. And I'm like,
Yeah,
cool, it's a construct as well as race. Also, capitalism is whack,
yeah.
and, dismantle the patriarchy. So I'm like, how can I be here for those things and then be like, but I need you to subscribe to this thing because it makes me more comfortable and it's words I already know.
Right.
Like,
Right? I mean, I just love the way that the 18 to 34-year-old crew
yeah.
embraces um, different differences in gender in
Mhm.
every kind of way. And I was just delighted when I started this channel and I started getting audience demographics and I saw
Yeah.
my people are 18 to 34. I was like, oh, they found
Okay,
me.
Sue. Okay, come through, Sue. Target demographics. Come on.
Of course,
Should we
the
sell
Hopeful
something? Should we
Tribe
try
is
to?
18 to 34.
I feel like we should promote a movie or something. Who needs? Who
Right?
needs?
Later, whatever. Right now, I'm just happy entertaining them and
Yeah.
throwing a little comfort and coping skills their way. I just
Yeah.
this is a time of, immense change. They're the ones who are going to have to lead that change,
Yeah.
right? Because we can't, you know.
And we
Um,
shouldn't, we got other stuff going on. And I like, it's like I like being able to learn new things from other people. Yeah, like the idea that I'm happy to use this time to be introspective and to think about how I was socialized and to apply these new things. But the chances that the innovation is going to come from me is just that's not how math works, right? Like that's not how it is. And so I think when we always talk about like looking back at our youth, or youth is wasted on the young, which is like not nice. In some ways I get it, and I get it as a joke, but I think also, the reason that you have like sort of a less of a sense of your own mortality is because it allows you to be freer. The stakes don't feel as high in some things, and they feel incredibly high when we're talking about forming of ideas and value systems. And people do it's this or that. It does feel very concrete. But that's how we are shaped. That's when you feel like your ideals are on the line, that's when you decide if they're really your ideals. And so, having been pregnant at 39 and given birth at 40, I'm glad that that's not where I am. And that I am in a place of, having a listening ear and being interested in, oh, what are we doing now? Cool. Show me the way. Happy to support. Let me leverage my positional power. Let me, leverage my calm. And I don't need to be on the front lines of every single fight, but I'm there, and available. And then sometimes I'm not. Go fishing, and it's going to be okay. And that's a learned skill. You don't have to be in every single fight, and that replenishment and taking the moment to step back and rest. Rest as a value,
yeah, rest is
I
a thing that needs to be
yes.
done. I just want to give thanks to your mom for protecting you from the mainstream before you went to kindergarten, because when you said that, it made so much sense who you are in the world today.
That's what most people say.
Totally makes sense now. And I think that other parents might want to try that.
It takes a lot of work out of it, down the line, I have to say. My mom was definitely one of those people. I also went to Montessori school early and started learning in French early. And I think just those environments, and even in those environments, my mom used to send me to school with sprouts, like bean sprouts. Mm-hmm. And kids were like, oh, that kid's eating grass, I remember that so vividly. And I must have been like 3, like now I'm thinking back at what age was that? Because maybe 4. But I remember that as standing out, and I'm like, oh, it's so interesting how these memories of being people attempting to otherize or marginalize you, the fact that I remember that story as funny, that tells me as a therapist that when I came home and told that story, the way my mother framed it let me know that it was funny, mm-hmm. and that it was a temporary feeling of someone attempting to make fun of me or make something that I do weird or laugh at my food or whatever the situation, and her just being like, oh, that's not us, And it's like, sometimes it is that small. Sometimes you don't have access to, Montessori books, or, have the capacity or the luxury of sitting down and reading articles, or, just not how you're oriented to the world. But those little moments where you're able to say to someone who depends on you, like, yeah, that other people's opinions don't define you. Mm-hmm. It's big. It's really, really big. But yeah, my mom was definitely one of those of like, they're probably their own person. It's fine. for everything. And then I'd be like, Mom, why is this? And her answer to everything was, go look it up. Can't wait to hear the answer. She never answered the question. My entire childhood.
Wow.
Like if it was about emotions, but if it was a fact, she refused to answer questions.
Yeah, I think my mom was the same way.
Yeah, we would have a discussion, but she wouldn't ever give me the answer to anything.
Well, and my mom would say that she was kind of a smart ass. She would say, I taught you how to read.
Oh, yeah. She was always like, can't wait to find out. Mom, how many inches are there, in a foot? Can't wait to find out. Mom, how long does the president stay in? Can't wait to find out. Looking forward to it. And I'd be like, why did I even come over here?
Right?
So then I'd be like, let me shortcut it. Let me go find the answer. And they'd be like, hey, Mom, did you know that there's 12 inches in a foot? And she'd be like, yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing. And I'd be like, okay, I get it. So
that's so
the
cool.
consistency of, and I think even, I remember coming home and being like my report card, the report card day. I remember being with the other kids in elementary school and then being like, okay, because this shows my age, which I'm learning happens all the time now, and it's not a big deal. But we had E for excellent, G for good, and then I think N was like neutral, or I don't even remember now. But everybody wanted to have the E's and the G's, right? There was no A, B, C, D.
Right. Doesn't matter what you call it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The yellow, the purple, whatever it was.
Uh-huh.
And they'd be like, okay, I got 5 E's, so that's going to be $25 or whatever, they like, and I'd be like, Larry gets paid for grades. And my mom was like, okay. I was like, can I? And she was like, you're responsible for your own education. I'm not even going to read your report card.
Wow.
You're like, do better if you want to do better. If you want help, I'll help you. But, it's not, you're not doing it to please me. You're not doing it like you want to learn, right? Yeah, I do. Okay, well, let's figure it out. And of course, honestly, my report card always said the same thing. Leah talks too much.
Oh my God, mine too.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Report card.
And I'm like, so what are you saying? God. You saying that you don't want people of color speaking up for themselves? Is that what you're saying? You trying to silence me?
Yeah, in first grade, I remember my teacher, Sister Ursula. She changed my speaking assignment like 5 times because I would just be chatting up whoever she put next to me.
Oh yeah.
The 5th time she put me next to this very quiet, shy boy and figured, hacked it, right? She's going to be quiet now.
Little did she know.
Oh, no. I had that boy cracking up by the end of the day.
Right? I'm like, oh, great. A time to practice new material. So who's here from out of town? Anybody? Any couples? Who's here? Who's here? What else?
She surrendered to my
teachers learned to just move me out of the room. They were like, do something. Go walk around. Do you need to use the bathroom? Would you like a bathroom pass? Are you sure? Do you want to just go walk around? Why don't you go take this blank piece of paper to Mrs. Abernathy? Okay.
It should have been a clue that we were going to be therapists when we grew up, right? But I mean, did you know you wanted to be a therapist when you were a little girl? Was that what you imagined in your head?
I think, well, again, so this is, it's interesting because, as I said, my mom passed when I was 24. Ooh. And so it's been me and my grandma doesn't, she's like, have kids, don't have kids, get married, don't get married. Like, you're still a person, it's fine. So without sort of that, like, I'll be like, Grandma, should I do this? And she's like, as long as they treat you well, it's fine, kind of thing. And so without that expectation at these milestones, that was also true as a kid. So I actually never thought about what I wanted to be. Like, I was like, I'm going to go to school, but no one ever asked me. I mean, in school, everyone said the same thing: a doctor, or a veterinarian, or whatever. Everyone wanted to be a veterinarian. We just wanted to play with animals all day, okay, and keep them safe. So I guess that's the same thing, but it's probably more complicated than that. But it wasn't until I remember my first. It was Mr. Tinloy at Oakland High in 1998 was my first psychology class. And so I was like, oh, this is a job? I was like, I'm doing this. I was like, oh, this talking and helping people, me being an indigenous healer and whatnot, like I could do this for work. This is what I'm going to do in school. Because I had been in therapy since I was very, very young, because I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And so I think I had a great therapist. And so I was like, oh, I like this relationship. I want to do what Susan does, come on, Susan. But I wanted to do that job, but I didn't know what it really entailed. I was like, oh, you get to like talk to people, make them feel better and ask them questions. And so early on, I didn't know that's what that was called. I was just like, oh, It's like a nice person who helps you. Cool.
Yeah.
And you feel better after you talk to them, or sometimes you feel worse and then you feel better. But yeah, I didn't know what that was. But then not until I was a junior in high school, and like they offered a psychology class, and I sat in the front row and like leaned in, on those terrible like body shaming desks that you have to squeeze your body into. I was like, how is this learning? Why can't I just have a chair and a table? Why? But anyway, and just listening to Mr. Tinloy talk, and the rest of the class was like, oh my God, if she does not shut up, because it's just me and Mr. Tinloy talking for 45 minutes. Like, I didn't let anybody else get it in. I was like, I read the book. I want to talk about this. Why is this like this? And so I think that was probably like the expansion there. And then I went to SF State, and I would say I was probably on my way to being, not that I needed much of a push, but being radicalized probably in high school, and then SF State really. Right. I did most of my units in the ethnic studies department. I worked in the ethnic studies department. And so learning under those kind of teachers, Dr. Richards, Dr. Saruta, Dr. Obitashaka, Dr. Wade Nobles, being in that environment, and then also learning psychology concurrently, and, really helped me to understand like, oh, okay, like this is why things are the way they are. So then it all sort of clicked, everything fit together.
Oh my gosh, we might have to do another interview and talk about liberation psychology.
Yeah.
Just one of my favorite subjects in the world. It would be a good, this one could be a good bridge to that.
Yeah, I love to talk about it. I spend, in our world, we have to spend so much time talking about things we don't want to talk about. When you get on a topic that, sits with you and is at your core, and, a lot of the articulation of my life comes through that lens, I'm always excited to talk more about it.
And I also had another idea that it would be cool to hear like a few months down the line what your plans are for Baywar.
Oh, oh yes.
I would love to hear that.
Yes, Baywar is turning 50 in October.
Wow.
So we're gonna celebrate, and then 2022 comes. So yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming and blessing us with your time and attention. It's such a pleasure. Really fun.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. This was so much fun.